Dear all, we had some technical problems yesterday. Therefore, I decided to record this video again. And I will incorporate also some answers to the question that follow the session. And I will do so with an example, a class example of the flow I have in mind and the way in which we go from situation to story and into plot. I am Associate Professor Romana Turina at the University Bournemouth, and today for the Comparative Screenwriting Research Network, I will offer a seminar on From Situation to Story and into Plot. A few words of introduction. As you know, situations are all around us, and stories are significant emotional experiences within situations, which are told via a list of events writer offer to the audience. The organization of these events under a specific focus allows for the definition of a plot, which is translated on a page and can be produced into a narrative, a film, an animation, a book, etc. It sounds rather simple, right? But maybe not so much, especially for students. This presentation wants to be a set of notes on a way to support students in developing story ideas, which I offer to you to open a discussion in the spirit of our comparative screenwriting seminar. So, situations. Initially, writer starts the process of story idea hunting in a state of chaos and madness, as the idea for a story is born out of a feeling, an encounter, the experience of a situation, a fascination with anything or everything present in the worlds of life. But life can't be portrayed in its complexity at once. It needs to be examined a piece at a time, even more so to make sense to an audience. Arguably, to conduct this examination, we have what we call stories. The analysis of situations. Well, that is the problem, right? To identify a meaningful story to tell, we often start by looking at a situation, which students often believe is a story. Understanding this and understanding the situation in itself implies a period of analysis that allows the writer to translate it into some order. If the trace we follow, looking for a story, is offered by a meeting with a person or the exposure to a world of life, the process of understanding the situation does not differ. The aim is always the same: find a story to tell and become aware of how to recreate it on the page. In general terms, I found that it is useful for writers to examine the situation, because within this situation there are stories pregnant of meaning, and within each story, writers recognize a set of possible themes to explore via the construction of interesting characters and a plot. Yet, there is so much choice, so many possibilities in one single situation. The ability to see what is useful when narrating a story can be hard to find and takes time. More than anything else, it takes trials. How to create narrative maps that support informed decisions, able to give cohesion between story, characters, and plot, but also able to open opportunity for writers to explore neglected aspects of story and characters. Well, the question, of course, is something we try all to answer. But maybe we should go back to something simple, something that students have an hard time to actually understand. They know the concept, they try to grasp it, but then to put it into producing something about it is harder yet. So, are really the layers of storytelling simple enough, clear? Are difference between situation, story, and plot obvious? How to make them so? For example, if a kingdom is without a regent, this is a possible situation. We can find out that this situation was created because the king died and then the queen died. That's a possible story. By asking how this could have happened, we can start to think of a list of events, a plot. For example, the king died and then the queen died of grief. We have a plot. It is possible, therefore, that the writer decides to focus on the experience and consequences of grief in the telling of the story via the plot. And this focus is the theme. The writer will then decide if this experience will be looked at from the point of view of the queen as protagonist, or somebody else involved in the expression, remembrance, consequences of grief related to the story. So, really, in the process of story ideas hunting, in the process of story development, what comes first? How do we work it in the most beneficial way for a young writer or an experienced writer of any age, really? So, what comes first? The great decision writer take on story or character, for example. A writer can start from anything but needs the presence of characters to carry the story. Characters react to situations, as the function of character is to act. And the lack of action is still an action in storytelling. Given a situation, infinite possible stories can be created. Infinite points of view can be explored by the construction of plots. But also, given a character, infinite possible stories can be created by situating the character in a situation. The labor of literally dropping a character into a situation and look at how they go about it provide writers with the vision of what the experience of each character can be and enable a choice about both story and what the story is about, the theme. In spending time in this exploration, it is useful to map each different character reaction to the same situation and trace what actions may allow for a story to emerge. Consequently, situations are a good place to start with when thinking of possible stories, as by exploring the ways characters get along or clash within a situation, writers allow tension and questions to emerge. Different characters will react differently in the same situation, illuminating aspects of the world of life they are in, aspect of the situation the writer put them in, an aspect of the character themselves. Therefore, one can say that characters dropped into situations are instruments of illumination on possible narrative maps. The analysis of plot. Character's reaction to a situation allows the writer to look into which reaction is meaningful to the possible audience and decide what they prefer to focus on in building the list of events to put in front of the audience to tell the story via the plot, and effectively in creating discourse on a theme. As a result, decision on plot that seem to be functional often reveal also the writer's take on life. If reflected upon, the writer can decide to go back to story and character and alter them to enforce their commentary on specific aspect of life via the theme. Sorry, there is a mistake there. Theme and communication. Well, it is all about communication, of course. And we do it by screenwriting on a page with words. And it is a process. In the process, one specific theme will catch the attention of the writer more than others. By now, by trial and error, writers would have put some order to the chaos of life they are interested in, rearranged life itself in a self-contained telling of a story found out in a situation they analyzed. The theme, put in front of the audience, syncretized out of a protagonist's experience and followed by the audience via the plot, would now focus the audience attention on a specific aspect within the story. The choice of a theme to focus on within the story as one possible story within a situation allows writer to select the events to put in front of the audience for satisfactory communication. However, the communication of themes has also to be adjusted to audience, to the cultural, historical context of the production. There is much to say about the implication, question, and creative decision related to audiences, but this is not a topic I will cover here. Similarly, plot analysis often require the writer to go back to characters and polish their qualities. At times, writers simply realize that a different character is more promising as a protagonist. The writer returns to the beginning, to character development. A way to do this is via the coherent paradox method. But I will not cover that here. There is another session on that. Therefore, here I try to touch upon a process of feedback loops, from situation to story into plot, from plot back to character and back to theme, as found within the pool of stories related to the original situation. A process of feedback loop enabling more depth and meaningful creative decisions. Certainly, this is another way to look at how a writer can tame the state of chaos presented to them when first looking for story ideas and interesting characters in the infinite possibility the different worlds of life may offer to them. Now, we had a few questions, and I thought about it, and because I had the possibility to record all over again, I decided to offer an example, a class example, that might be able to better illustrate this flow of feedbacks. So, a student of mine, who I will call Paul, wanted to write a story about his own experience of leaving home to study in a different country. Actually, it was a different town. During our first meeting, I asked Paul to put in a few words the situation he found himself in before he left home and how he felt at the idea of leaving. During the first meeting, that was everything we talked about. During our second meeting, Paul explained his feelings and the sense of loss he experienced at the idea of leaving his town and friends in particular. I asked Paul what aspect of leaving his friends behind, how he said, was returning in his mind, that was tormenting him and surprising him maybe. I wanted to know how. He could not tell exactly. Thus, I asked Paul to consider what are his own most dominant characteristics as a person. We had a conversation, really, about many aspects of his character and the situation related to his friends that came to mind the most. As homework, I asked him to complete 2 exercises. First, to create a few core and paradox compasses with different values. The point of this exercise was to allow him to best find a fitting core and paradox compass to emerge and to help him to construct a character representing him somehow. The second exercise was to drop in a familiar situation each different core and paradox representing him and see what that kind of compass would do, how the character would react to the situation. Our aim was to see what combination of value in the compass would allow closer reaction to the character, to what Paul felt valuable and realistic in representing himself in the chosen familiar situation. So he did so. He created compasses and he dropped each current part of compass representing one way of creating the character into the situation and looked at it. Look at how that kind of character would react to the situation and try to see what character, what current compass would represent him best. The third meeting signed a moment of crisis. Paul came and spread on my table numerous current paradox compasses and stated something like, I am all of them. I put them in one situation and look what came out. There are so many stories, what would you do? In fact, he put in front of me about 10 possible reactions to one situation, which could lead to a story. I think that as a writer, Paul had reached the moment when he was able to see how the depicted situation was pregnant of storytelling possibilities, possible themes, and points of view from which angle to be the plot. At that stage, we tried a few possible plots based on a few story ideas and realized that one current paradox compass was coming up more than others as a possible fitting character. As homework, I asked him to complete 2 exercises again. First, to copy the current paradox compasses in a character sheet and add the story elements required to picture the character for characterization: gender, age, culture, nationality, location, here in which the story takes place, location, family composition, and only the backstory that was needed. Of course, at this point, well, it was also important to see if the knowledge of the character had of the new town he was supposed to move to was of importance to exploring a theme. Second, I asked Paul to build a first bit sheet or story bit sheet, a list of important key bits for the story, to see what he had in mind and try to translate into a list of events that might guide the audience within the story and we would follow as a plot. It didn't have to be perfect. It was not the final version, of course. It was a way to test the dramatic elements needed to make function of the character, the story, the place, everything. We had to test storytelling possibility. I secretly hoped at this stage that the process would help Paul to decide on the theme of the story. As at this point, it was interested in a few subjects. So the fourth meeting came, and it was based on the material Paul sent me. The focus of the story crystallized somehow on the importance of personal connections. The characters put into place into the situation serve the purpose: a young man visiting a friend to say goodbye in a corner shop. The situation slowly allowed to emerge the effect of the passing of time on people and places and the dramatic moment of detachment from the place itself. Paul and I agreed it was time to build a plot enabling the exploration of the theme, one which would communicate it effectively to the audience. As expected, the fourth meeting ended with a few possible plots that we explore, and he decided on 2 specifically. Fifth meeting was extraordinary. I still remember it very vividly. He produced a treatment and a first draft, the vomit draft, as I called it, and sent it to me early enough to allow me time to give a meaningful feedback. In the treatment, Paul set up the story, introduced the protagonist and the inner antagonist, anxiety for the work of time and distance to come. Paul had also introduced the inciting incident and made clear the main tension in the story. The midpoint was not clear yet, but the climax was there in both its parts. The false resolution could be seen playing its part in the plot, and the hint to the resolution was there. There was work to be done, obviously, but Paul had understood his way to process the material. However, at this stage, he hit the wall. The protagonist all of a sudden felt not real enough. Not real enough to him. It was not him. He was conscious that he could not put himself on the page completely because human beings are much more complex than characters, but he was still struggling in understanding which kind of quality really best represented him. We read the material, consider what the midpoint could do for the story and how to deepen the engagement of the audience with the theme, but mostly we consider how to alter the current paradox compasses of all characters. The cascade of minute changes specific to current paradox compasses that happen then allow for a more powerful expression of all the dramatic elements in the story. Paul edited the compasses and started to work with more coherent, layered, and interesting characters, produce a strong focus in the protagonist's emotions, precision in dialogue, and the merging of what the midpoint and the resolution needed to be for Paul's story, as the theme he wanted to explore now became clear. The theme was this fear and what makes connection last in the face of change, really. The whole dealing with the theme asked for delicate attention to details, which now he could work on. As a result, Paul wrote a story about his own experience of leaving home to study in a different town, implementing a story development flow that went from defining a situation to explore, to finding the character representing him and the story he was interested in telling. The feedback loop consisted of a simultaneous look at character, story, theme, and the events needed to build an adequate plot. Paul went back to character development a few times and took a while in deciding on the plot that would better communicate the theme to the audience. The theme changed a few times, as expected. More than change, actually they polished themselves, it focused more and more. And in focusing, impacted the telling. But in the end, Paul found a specific theme and all elements were updated. The story and the plot that came out was expressed in putting in front of the audience two friends. We follow two friends facing not only Paul transition to university life in a different town, but the closure of the shop that symbolized their childhood together. In the screenplay, the audience can see how and feel how, story bit by story bit, the crisis, the pain, and the fear caused by change touch the character, but intensify the feeling of friendship they have for each other and make them understand that places and times may change, but their bond is there to last. Naturally, I believe there are many ways to work situations, to understand situations, to work and understand what story means, and to see what plot can help with in telling them. I hope this session was useful for thinking about these elements, which seems to be so simple to writers when are understood, but are so very hard to understand for some students. I thank you, and I will post this in our channel, of course, and I will invite you to our next seminar